Hello everybody and welcome to OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. I'm Jack and I'm here today with Joe, and we're going to give a bit more of a condensed rotation discussion. We wanted to upload our initial thoughts over the weekend, that long 2 hour video, so if you managed to check that out, thank you very much. But this one's going to be sort of the main cards we're losing. There's 10 or 11 cards that we're going to discuss, and sort of why they've been so impactful on the format. Just sort of condensing down the video that we made at the weekend for everyone that doesn't have time to be able to watch all 2 hours of every single card that we're losing. So Joe, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, well, we're going to start off with, everything's pretty much high impact here, and you would have seen it in recent tournaments and probably would have continued had the rotation not been announced. So first off, we're going to talk about Laserbank. Very, very ridiculously powerful. Being able to do like a 30 damage plus power, and when you combine it with stuff like Toad, that continues to happen because they can't get out of the lock very easily. It was just really, really powerful. Toad was probably where it was most prominent. It was also used in dark decks quite a bit as well, like Yveltal to help you get one shots. But it's really good to see that sort of thing go, because it means now we really go back to a situation where if you want to be hitting hard damage, you need to be using attackers that can actually hit hard. You can't just increase your laser bank, just throw the laser bank in there to do stuff with stuff like Toad, where you're otherwise hitting not really enough damage to win you a game. Laser bank would rebalance that for you. Now the hard hitting decks are going to be the ones, higher end energy costs or higher setup requirements, and the lower hitting stuff is going to be more sort of fast paced, trying to take the prizes early on. So it's good to see that sort of balance come back, I think.
Yeah, like I discussed in the 2 hour in the first video, I feel it was the laser part of Laserbank that was the more broken part because of the sleep flip as well. The sleep flip was so huge with Laserbank. Like one awkward sleep flip for you could mean you lose the game just because you need to continue pressure, especially against things like Toad before Trump Card was banned. If you couldn't keep pressure on the Toads, eventually, whilst it seemed like they weren't doing too much damage, if you missed like one heads, all of a sudden you've sort of skipped a turn because you can't use trainers and you're not doing damage to them as well. So all of a sudden you're sort of putting yourself a turn behind. I'd love to see some form of Verbanks stay or be reprinted, just because I think the whole status archetype is cool, and I don't think it's represented enough really. I feel that there's one or two cards that are sometimes good, but I feel it's sort of brushed under the carpet sometimes. But yeah, it's definitely good to see this go at least for a while, just because it made Toad so strong. And it looks like, whilst this wasn't specifically aimed at Toad, I feel like Pokemon are really realising some of these broken combos and are sort of adapting how they make cards and things like that based on what's obviously stupidly good and things like that. I think the Trump card was the first sign of that, and now hopefully they've realised that Laser Verbank going is another good thing. So yeah, I think everyone's quite happy to see that go at least for a while. Next up, we're going to be talking about the Keldeo Floatstone combo, another really good combo which basically gave all of your Pokemon free retreat, considering Keldeo could rush in using its ability, and then if it had a Floatstone on it, it had free retreat. So you'd rush in and free retreat, getting out of status conditions like Laserbank, but also letting you set up with things like Bronzong. You could put your active attacker back onto the bench, set up things with Bronzong, or any other sort of type of thing like that, and then use the Floatstone to free retreat back into the attacker again. I don't really feel this was a broken combo or anything. I just think it was a really cool way of seeing these two cards come together. And it's definitely going to be missed. I mean, Keldeo Floatstone, it was used quite a bit, has always been used quite a bit, but it's being used a lot more in sort of metal raid decks at the moment, and metal in general. That's probably where it's seen the most, other than Keldeo itself being in sort of Archiestoise or Primal Kyogre and things like that. The Keldeo Floatstone combo is probably most suited for Bronzong decks at the moment, just because that's really the only energy manipulator from the discard, like Electric back in the day. But yeah, Keldeo Floatstone is another sort of sad pair to go. Keldeo was also a decent attacker when it first came out, so along with Blastoise, and because we're losing that as well, we're sort of losing the whole Rain Dance mechanic. But Keldeo nowadays is seen more for its ability more than anything.
Yeah, it's sad to see it go. Fortunately, like we say, Laserbank's going, so there's less sort of influence of status at the moment. Maybe the Mega Ampharos can be a reason to wish Keldeo back, but just in general as well, Floatstone is really nice just because the lack of free retreating Pokemon we have in the game right now. Being able to pretty much like have a switch um, that we can use more than once is really good, and it's kind of annoying now that we have to play like high counts of switch just in case we get Lysander stalled or something like that. It feels like that's going to be a much stronger strategy with the XY on format, with people not wanting to play 3 or 4 switch just for consistency issues. But then if they don't, they can get caught off guard every now and again and lose a couple of prizes or let your opponent back into the game by stalling out a couple of turns. So seeing the Keldeo Floatstone, just Floatstone in general, it's going to be a bit annoying to see those go because now we really need to like up our counts of switching cards. So next up, we're going to talk about Garbodor, another thing that loved to be paired with Floatstone, actually. Yeah, it was an ability locker, very powerful, kept things in check, like safeguarders. They're mainly going anyway at the moment. But anything trying to set up too much, really, or use abilities for draw power, like Empoleon, or stuff like that, even just Shaymins and Jirachis throughout the mid to late game, trying to stop people doing what they want to do in their setup, basically. Garbodor was your man for that sort of action, and always good for slower decks. Again, it was paired with Toad for a while, paired again with Dark decks as well. Also, even big basics back in the day. So, Garbodor saw a lot of play throughout his career, and now we're really left with just Wobbuffet as our main way of getting rid of ability at the moment, and then Hex Maniac coming out in Ancient Oranges as well. So, probably Hex Maniac is going to be the one that sort of fills the gap for Garbodor, but it's nevertheless like pretty much permanent. Permanent ability lock is like really powerful, and yeah, Garbodor's a big one we're going to be missing.
Yeah, I was going to say that we've only got 2 Pokemon now, well, 2 ways of stopping abilities now, and obviously Wobbuffet is technically kind of niche because you stop your own abilities as well, whereas Hexmaniac you can choose when you stop your abilities. But yeah, I definitely agree. Hexmaniac's probably going to fill the Garbodor role a little bit more. Garbodor's seen less and less play as we've gone through the rotations. It's still always seen play, but when Garbodor was first released, you either sort of played Garbodor or played around Garbodor, but and abilities were locked down quite a bit for a while. Then Garbodor became a little bit too slow, and the format became faster. And now Shaymin's out. Garbodor saw a bit more play. Obviously, it's seen a lot of play in America, with Jason Klaczynski winning with it. So it's obviously still represented, but I don't feel it's represented anywhere near as much as it used to be, because we have more options now. And that's probably, that along with the speed of the format, probably affected Garbodor quite a bit, because Garbodor can cut consistency quite a bit, considering you're putting a 2-2 line in that you're not even attacking with, and then you need some form of tool that you probably don't want to be the tool that you're going to have on your active anyway, so that's probably 2 or 3 Floatstones as well, so that's cutting out quite a few cards of your deck. So yeah, Garbodor slowed decks down, but for a time it was definitely a powerhouse in the format, even if it didn't actually take an attack. The next card is technically I guess our first real attacker. It's Landorus EX. Landorus EX has really dominated the format over the past 2 years, especially with... It was first out when Eels were out, and it did so well against Eels because it could get rid of 2 Tynamos at once if they played the 30 HP ones, and it could always pretty much keep Eels in check, if not beating Eels outright. Again, it saw more big basics play, sort of Mewtwo's and things like that, and then a lot of people initially thought this time last year when rotation was announced we were going to lose Landorus, just before Furious Fist came out, and it was announced that Landorus would be staying. He just made it into the rotation for this year, which meant Landorus got all of these fighting toys to become an absolute monster. It got things like Strong Energy, Karina, and then Fighting Stadium, making its already efficient 1 for 30 snipe attack into something insane. You can get things like 1 for 90 30s at times. It was so strong. So yeah, Landorus has definitely dominated the format over the past 2 or 3 years, and it's always been a good card. It's never had a particularly bad matchup. It's always quite a good card against in general, but just because of how low the energy cost was and high the damage was. And then things like Land's Judgment to one-shot on EX to take the last 2 prizes, it wasn't even unheard of that happening quite a few times as well. So Landorus was definitely a big card over the past 2 years, especially when it got all of its Furious Fists, like added damage boosters and things like that. It meant that Landorus really became strong and is still seen all the time today. Landorus Bats, when talking about Boundaries Crossed On, is definitely still a pretty popular deck. That people have to think about, even if they don't play it, they have to think about how they're going to be able to take it out. And obviously it puts so many deck counters on the board, you have to really think about what you're playing down, because if you accidentally put one too many Pokemon down that's going to cause your opponent to take 6 prizes really easily, then they can do it really quickly, just because with the snipe damage and the bat damage, it makes the deck quite formidable. So yeah, it's definitely sad to see Landorus go.
Yeah, it's one of those decks that it can really punish slow starts, basically just win the game after, like, if you're pretty much uncontested as a Landorus player for like 2 or 3 turns, you're just going to win because of the amount of counters you get. And also, like, sort of looking to the future, sort of XY on, Landorus is probably the best check that we have to Raichu right now. So I feel like there's going to have to be new ways of trying to get around Raichu, because Landorus is really effective at dealing with that. Maybe we're going to have to look towards stuff like Ninetales to try and make sure that they can't get that big damage out with a Raichu. But it looks to me like Raichu's pretty much lost its biggest threat in the format right now. So that paves quite a good path for it, I would say. Actually, another thing that can put a stop to Raichu is Donphan, and that's the next one we're going to talk about. Donphan going. It's one of these hit and switch cards, very powerful. It's got the Robo-Subs, it's got sometimes other techs like Sigilyph, Wobbuffet, Aegislash. And yeah, just again, abused all the fighting type things that we can have. The Karinas, the extra damage boosters, to be two-shotting things. The Wreck could also finish off games a bit quicker than usual, forcing your opponent to have Lysanders, or at least have an alternate strategy to just hitting into the face. Very, very powerful deck. It was sometimes paired with Groudon as well. I actually think that's one of the best decks we have, even currently right now, in the format that we're in, using Donphan and then cleaning up maybe 3 or 4 prizes with the Groudon mid to late game. And that's a strategy that we're just not going to see much of anymore. We just have the Gengar at the moment that can do that. And even then, it's another one of these things where we lose Floatstone, so the hit and switch is kind of weakened now, because you can't just keep moving into whatever wall you were using. You have to keep finding new switches or means of getting out of there. The only other thing that we have is the Mienshao from Furious Fists, which technically does the same damage as Donphan, but you have to go back into the hand. Now, a lot of people didn't like using that because of N, but N is going, and we'll talk about that a bit more later. So potentially Mienshao can fill the boots, but I'm not convinced personally.
Yeah, Donphan's, it was sort of a hidden card until Furious Fist came out, and then all of a sudden, it's just got so big and is such a formidable card for just like an uncommon as well. So yeah, Donphan definitely earned his place on this list, because he just sort of came out of nowhere, and is another deck that you've really got to think about. If you can't beat Donphan, then you've got to probably go back to the drawing board and work out what are you going to put in to be able to deal with such a huge threat. Next on the list is a pair of cards, Virizion and Genesect, obviously paired together in Virgin, which was another great, really consistent archetype that has done well ever since they were first released. I'm pretty sure it's won World. I think it won Worlds either once or twice, and it's just such a strong sort of archetype overall. Being able to set up really quickly with Virizion, and then G-Booster with Genesect, knocking out anything until Megas came out, and then even then Megas were too slow to be able to deal with it, just because of how quick Virgin could get set up. They'd often go down 2 prizes, sacking in a Virizion to set up 2 Genesects, and all of a sudden you have 2 EXs to deal with that are doing either 200 damage each or 120 on the bench. So it's definitely a really strong archetype. Then separately, they were both really good cards as well. Virizion was obviously seen in pretty much anything that played Grass Energy just to stop Laserbank. That's how impactful Laserbank was. People were taking like single cards just to make sure they're not affected by Laserbank. So yeah, Virizion was seen a lot just to try and avoid being able to for your opponent being able to abuse laser bank on you. And then pretty much any colourless deck, you probably wanted a Virizion in there just because there was no sort of type of energy you needed, and the only one that was really boosted was Virizion. So Virizion's always seen a lot of play. Genesect, again, has also seen a lot of play outside of Virgin. Just sort of a one-of in pretty much anything that plays Plasma. Just because it was mainly when Catcher was nerfed and then Lysander came out in the sort of transition period. A lot of people played Genesect just because it was an auto catcher, like Catcher once was. In things like Executor, they used it. It's definitely earned again another card that's earned his place just because he has such an impactful ability, and then with G Booster it made the deck so strong because a lot at the time, if you couldn't deal with sort of a consistent 2 G Boosters, then you lost the game. And there were cards to deal with it like Spiritomb and Tool Scrapper and things like that, but you had to hit those cards at the right time to be able to stop them being able to G Booster through your whole deck and just win the game in 2 or 3 turns.
Yeah, 2 really, really powerful abilities, and then they complemented each other in terms of attacks as well. So it was obvious that those 2 were going to be good cards for a long time, and they did prove to be the case. So now we're going to go back to more trainer-based stuff. We're going to talk about all the A-Specs. A-Specs, mainly Computer Search and Dowsing Machine. They were just a single card that can really boost consistency overall. It has the power of a supporter pretty much, but it's just a trainer, and that's just something we're really going to miss. And then in terms of the sort of more techie ones, like I think Scoop Up Cyclone and Scramble Switch are probably the most prominent ones that spring to mind.
Yeah.
They can just be a single card in your deck that can almost completely shift your whole game plan, and that's, a bunch of cards that we can't have access to anymore. And it's going to be a real shame for current decks. Like anyone playing Bats love to play the Scoop Up Cyclone in recent times. Groudon often played the Scramble Switch to try and give itself a new breath of life, have basically another round 2 of Groudons to get through. And I think A-Specs are going to be sorely missed overall just for consistency base, but also they really helped make some decks like really original and spring out of nowhere type situations. And that's going to be a bit of a shame to see those go.
Yeah, without a doubt. Like out of all of the cards that we're losing, I really hope that's the one concept I hope they bring back. I think A-Specs was such a good idea, just because it wasn't your supporter for the turn, but it was still a really powerful effect, and you had to really think about when you wanted to use these cards, just because they could completely change the game. And it meant that they could really print some interesting cards, like Scramble Switch. We'd never really seen anything like it before, but all of a sudden you can manipulate all of your energy to the active. Well, okay, that really opens up so many doors for so many different decks. So I think A-Specs are going to be, personally, the cards I miss the most, just because I think, like Joe said, they gave so much creativity to the format. And I think they could really be creative with the cards themselves as well. It meant that they could print some what would initially be controversial things, but because you can only run one in your deck, and you have to pick when you use it, it meant you could really sort of think about when was the best time to use these cards. Especially now Trump Card was banned. A-Specs sort of lost their whole, there's only one in the deck, the sort of ruling on that, because then you could Trump Card them back in. But as Trump Card's been banned, I would love to see A-Specs come back, just because I think it would be another way of making the format unique, and I think, again, it really brings in powerful effects for quite cheap costs. Another card that I'm definitely sad to see go is Jirachi. Jirachi has seen so much play. Initially, a lot of people were like, oh, it's only got 90 HP and it gives up 2 prizes. I don't want to play this card because it's just a walking 2 prizes whenever they want. But it helps so much with consistency. Some decks, a lot of decks went straight into playing 1. Some decks play 2 now. There's some decks like Night March that sometimes plays 2, just to be able to find the Archie, always be able to set up really quickly. Jirachi, you pretty much run Jirachi in most decks anyway. Just because it's such a good consistency card, it turns all of your Ultra Balls into basically search your deck for a supporter and use it. It's just so strong. And I think we've still got Shaman, which sort of heals the wound a little bit, but they're not the same. One of them's drawing, one of them's searching. They're all such different concepts. I mean, Jirachi obviously was a lot more flexible about what you wanted. But then sometimes you want to be shamaning for extra cards. They're very different cards, and whilst Shaman sort of fills the hole a little bit, I think Jirachi is definitely going to be one of the most resourceful Pokemon that we're going to miss, because it's just seen everywhere.
Yeah, it was basically like a get out of jail free card. It allowed you to have like 5 extra slots in your deck that can help you turn one. So the Jirachi itself, the Ultra Balls, just very, very fantastic. And unlike Shaman, it's kind of like what you're saying. There's times when Shaman's not good. Jirachi would always be good.
Yeah.
Because, the supporters that we did have, like, even if we had 6 cards in our hand that were completely unplayable, we could end and try and refresh. Whereas a Shaman, you're sat with unplayable cards, and then you're either not going to play it or you're just going to get one off it, and it's not really worth it. So Jirachi, definitely a powerful ability that we're seeing go. And again, it's going to try and harm consistency over all of decks, and we're going to have to rebalance that somehow in our deck building. So now we are going to move on to the supporters that we're losing. There's quite a wide variety of supporters that we are losing, powerful in different respects, and we're not really left with too many draw supporters anymore. The first one we're going to talk about is Skylar. Skylar is just search your deck for any trainer or supporter card, or stadium, I guess. And it was a really good card. You could play Professor's Letter to get you into energy if you wanted it to go down that route. You could find yourself a Pokemon via an Ultra Ball. You could find yourself supporter next turn. You could kit your deck out with single cards that could just be really impactful at the right time. Like people played single, Max Potion or Energy Switch or something that can really just twist a game in a turn. And Skylar really made that one-of card really consistent, that you're going to be able to get value out of that card in the most games you play. So a very good supporter card. Again, it was just a good consistency booster, and it's not confirmed that it's definitely going to go, because there's the Japanese promo release of it, but that's most likely, if we do get it, not coming in Ancient Origins at all. So we're going to lose Skylar for at least a little while, so we do have to discuss life without Skylar for a bit.
Yeah, it's going to be at least until November until we get Skylar back. And I think that will be the absolute earliest, because I think it will just be another full art in a set. So it's going to be a little while at least, but we may see Skylar back. But for now, like Joe says, we're going to have probably the first 3 or 4 months of the rotation at least without Skylar, or having to play without Skylar. So then the second supporter is Colrus. Colrus is another card like Skylar, which is just always... Well, it's just such a cool sort of attack... Sorry, no... card effect, I guess, and especially as soon as Skyfield was released, the value on this card was so high. You could get 16 cards. You could shuffle your hand back into your deck and draw 16 cards, which is just crazy. Obviously, some people didn't like Colrus. I initially didn't like Colrus at all, because I didn't want to be starting with Colrus, because you're going to get 1 or 2 cards. But I think as the formats progressed and we've got new different sort of deck archetypes, especially Raichu and Rayquaza being the main ones. Some people play more Colrus over N now. It's that strong with Skyfield. If you know you're going to be playing Skyfield, you know you're going to be having a high Colrus count, because it can get you so many cards. Colrus again is another draw supporter that we're losing. And like Joe said, we lose quite a bit draw supporter wise. We've only got, I think, 4 or 5 that are even viable. Some of them, and even some of those, are questionable. There's the Shauna and Birch debate that is the main sort of supporter debate that we've got at the moment, and that's sort of how difficult the supporter questions are at the moment. So Chorus will definitely be missed. I feel it was one of the best supporters we had in the format, especially with Skyfield, because it was always a good amount of cards. It never sort of, even at 10, even when Skyfield wasn't released, drawing 10 cards is nothing to sniff at whatsoever, especially as it's shuffle draw as well. If it was discard draw, then maybe it would be a different situation, but the fact that it's shuffle draw is so good. It's just, I'm really going to miss the card. It meant that you could definitely sort of get yourself out of really difficult situations, and where an end to like 2, you may be like, oh, I don't know whether I'm going to get this card. You could then, I can via Seeker of Colrus and get 9 or 10 cards. Oh, okay, I'm going to get this card because I've got 2 of them in my deck. the odds are I'm going to get them. It just made for a lot safer sort of shuffle draw support players, and it's definitely a really interesting effect. I know there are a couple of Pokemon that still have that effect, but you'd never want Pokemon as sort of attacking as some sort of draw support. You want draw support from supporters. So yeah, it's definitely going to be missed.
Yeah, just ridiculously powerful shuffle draw. With Skyfield, it's actually ridiculous how many cards you can get off that with no drawback. So, it is its time for it to go, just because it would be ridiculously crazy to keep this for another 2 years. But it's, something I would obviously want to play in my own deck because it's going to get me loads of cards, and we just don't have access to it now. So finally, we'll talk about N.
The big one.
It's going. This has impact in the format for so many different reasons. It was a great turn 1 supporter to try and bail you out, get you a fresh 6, which was nice. Also, if your opponent's maybe mulligan 2 or 3 times, he's got a hand of 7, 8, 9 cards. You can end them out of that sort of advantage, I guess. Whenever you know your opponent sort of sat on a decent hand, like if they've searched for something and then not played it, you could try and end that away, force them into awkward spots. Obviously, late game, you're going to try and limit your opponent to how many cards they have access to, so that they can't just win. And even if you're it was a good card for newer players as well. Coming back into the game, N is a perfect thing to sort of help you out in those sorts of situations. Try and rebalance it. You get yourself more cards than your opponent. It's just you win by playing cards in this game. So obviously N is a powerful supporter in that aspect. All round, it's just fantastic. Early game, the only time I wouldn't really like to play N was in mid game, or if you're going crazy far ahead. But pretty much every time throughout the game, there's a good time to end someone for a multitude of different reasons. So really, really powerful supporter. It changes a whole lot about how we're going to play our own game as well, because now we can be sort of more safe in the knowledge that we can, hold cards for a strategy for 2 or 3 turns down the line, thinking that we need to hold these resources for that certain point and then, do this, that, and the other. Whereas before, we sort of had to try and play our hand out almost as best we could in fear of being end, rather than, I don't think this is the perfect time to play this card. Potentially I could get punished for it. But at least I have access to it now, so let's try and play that card. So, and it's crazy how dominant this card has been and how it's shaped the format. So it does really change a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I said A-Specs is the concept I'm going to miss the most, but N's the card I'm going to miss the most. It's just, it's a staple in pretty much every deck. You're going to see N in most decks, just because it's again such a good shuffle draw. Like Joe said, early game, late game, there's always a good time for N. But that being said, I kind of hope whilst we're getting Ace Trainer in the next set, Ace Trainer isn't all that, and it's definitely, I don't think it's going to see anywhere near as much play, or if any play, at least for a while. So that being said, I kind of hope we don't get any shuffle draw, like Judge or anything like that, for a little while, just so we can all feel safe in the knowledge of getting cards for 2 or 3 turns ahead. Because I personally have never played in a format like that, so I want to see what it's like. I want to see what it's like to plan your strategy out and see how well it goes, because like Joe said, you're always in the fear of N. You can't get cards for 3 turns ahead because they're going to get end away. If they're not end on the next turn, your opponent will make it their mission to find an N because they know you've got what you need. But yeah, I really hope we get at least a couple of months or a couple of sets without anything like that. I don't think Ace Trainer is going to be played particularly in any capacity. I could be eating my words by the time Ancient Origins come out, but I don't think it will be. Because I think Birch and Shauna are better, whilst they're not particularly good. I think they're better. But yeah, N is probably the one that's I'm most sad to see go. Speaking of what I'm most sad to see go, we want to know what you guys are most upset about. There's a lot of cards going that we managed to talk about 2 hours worth of cards, so there's definitely a lot going, and we didn't even touch on everything there. There's so many more cards. So we want to know what you guys are most upset about seeing go, because it's really interesting to hear what you guys, sort of your guys' opinions and what you guys think about the rotation and stuff, which is why we wanted to do a second video, not only on viewer request, but we also wanted to make sort of a more of a community video to find out what you guys feel about the rotation and how you guys are dealing with it and what you're going to miss the most. So make sure you leave down in the comments what you are going to miss the most and what you're looking forward to rotation wise, because we're making lots of sad videos about all the cards we're losing, but rotations are good at the end of the day. They keep the game fresh, and I'm really looking forward to XY on, because it's sort of a restart. Everyone restarts and everyone's in the same boat, and all of a sudden we've got loads of new archetypes to play with.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. We're testing already. As soon as those English scans drop of the full set, we'll be starting to profile all of the stuff that we've been testing crazily. I think we've nailed some pretty decent lists already for a few things, so, and there's still plenty more for us to test. So we're going to be on the forefront. As soon as we get those scans, we can start proxying and getting good content out for you guys. So it should be a lot of fun. Yeah, let us know. You know, if it's a Pokemon, if it's a supporter. I know everyone's pretty much just going to say N, because just how crazy impactful. But potentially maybe your favorite Pokemon that's going, or, you know, a fun ability, even an attacker that we haven't mentioned or something. We'd love to hear it. So yeah, drop us a like and a comment.
Yeah,
Tell your friends.
And yeah, like Joe said, we've been testing the format, and XY on is a lot of fun. It's really crazy. And again, you can plan your turns out and things like that. So it's definitely sort of a whole new ball game. So we're really excited to be able to bring this rotation with you guys. This is the first rotation that we've had the channel open. So we're going to be, like Joe said, at the forefront, giving you lots of new decks and lots of new lists for you to test with, and hopefully bringing you some really good quality content. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. I've been Jack, and I've been here with Joe today from OmniPoke. And we've been talking about lots of the different things that we're going to lose. But rotation is good, guys. Don't worry. Make sure you stick here on the channel for lots of new X and Y on lists in the next couple of weeks. Pre-releases start, I believe, a week on Saturday, so we're really close to the Ancient Origins now. It's just around the corner. So yeah, make sure you keep it locked here, and we hope to see you guys in another video. Thank you for watching.